So All-Star voting has been open for about 2 weeks now, and this is always an exciting time of year for NBA fans. However, this year's All-Star game will be a little bit different as there will be little to no fans in the NBA stadium. And that's what makes All-Star Weekend so fun, as you've got all the fans there, some celebrities, and the whole vibe is just really nice. And unless you've been living under a rock, you'll have heard that LeBron has said he has no interest in playing in the All-Star game, and other stars have followed suit. But nevertheless, the All-Star game is still going to take place on March the 7th in Atlanta. But it's not actually the All-Star game as such that I'm going to talk about today, but more so the All-Star voting process. In case you didn't know, the vote is split up by 50% fan vote, 25% player vote, and 25% from the media. But this is only a recent change in fact, as back in 2017, Zaza Pachulia was almost an All-Star starter. After the first return of votes, Zaza had over 439,000, which was the second most out of the Western Conference frontcourt. And with the NBA seeing this as the joke that it was to NBA fans, they chose to incorporate the player and media vote. But I have an interesting question actually as to who the All-Stars should actually be, because should they be the 24 best players in the league, or just 24 players that all the fans want to see play? Because I feel like the All-Star game should include the 24 best players in the league and not really any joke picks. And in the past, the NBA has given this responsibility to the fans, and there was never really any joke picks like Zaza Pachulia back in 2017. But then at the same time, I feel it's almost impossible for fans to know who the best players are, and especially when it comes down to the top 20, top 30 area, as the fans aren't the guys actually playing the games and playing against the players, and most fans won't watch a lot of the games and won't see certain players and teams play. So this can lead to discrepancies between players who deserve to be an All-Star but aren't so popular, and then players who aren't really good enough to be an All-Star but are just super popular with fans. One of these most notable players I feel is Bradley Beal, and while he's getting a lot of love this year, this was certainly not the case last year. He received the second most votes out of guards in the Eastern Conference, but that's just looking at player votes. And this would have given him a starting place in the All-Star game, and the players considered Bradley Beal the second best guard in the East. But then when you look at the fan votes, he only received the 9th most votes, and this caused him to miss out on the All-Star game altogether. And considering that Bradley Beal averaged over 30 points a game for this season, I think he deserved an All-Star spot. And the year before that, he was in a very similar situation, where he received the 3rd most votes for guards in the East, but then just the 10th most votes from fans. And of course, he missed out on an All-Star selection once again. And then you have players on the other end of the spectrum, where they received a lot of votes from fans, but very few votes from players. In 2019, Klay Thompson received the 5th most votes among guards in the West, but that's just when you look at the fan vote. And then when you look at the player vote, he was all the way down at 11th, with some interesting players going above him, with Drew Holiday, Mike Conley, and DeMar DeRozan all finishing above him. And while I would say that Klay Thompson is better than all 3 of these players, it's interesting that the NBA players themselves don't agree. And the point I'm getting at with all this is that the All-Star voting system may still have its flaws, because as a whole, I don't think the basketball community can be trusted to have the majority vote for All-Stars. Because every year it seems like there's always a player that misses out that completely deserved an All-Star spot. And while I do understand that it's inevitable that there will always be players who miss out, I think it's less likely to happen when you give the players themselves the majority vote. So this is the system that I'm going to propose. Instead of the fans having 50% of the vote, I'm going to give that to the players, and then the fans and media have 25% each. But I'm going to still add a few more changes actually. And while I'm not fully sure how the players vote at the moment, I can tell by looking at the number of votes that LeBron James gets, for example, that players don't choose a full starting 5. Because obviously I'm sure every NBA player would agree that LeBron James should have a starting position in the All-Star game, and that would give him around 400 votes, as there's about 400 NBA players in the league. So I think that NBA players should pick out a starting 5 for the East and the West exactly like we do, with 2 guards and then 3 in the frontcourt. And of course, us fans, we still get 25% of the vote, so we can still vote every single year, much like we do now. Because I'll be honest, it is always quite fun to vote, and it just makes you really feel a part of the NBA. And if the NBA made these changes without a big song and dance about it, then I think most fans wouldn't even realise. And now I'm not expecting a lot of fans to agree with me here, as I do think most fans would prefer to see it go back to the 100% fan vote. But like I've said before, if that was the case, we'd be seeing players like Taco Fall and Alex Caruso starting in the All-Star game, and while that may be quite funny to watch at the time, I really just think the All-Star game should be the best players in the world. And if that was the case, I think the credibility of the All-Star game would just really go downhill and it'd lose the true meaning of what being an All-Star actually is. And now this is just a bit of a side note, but I think the All-Star game is so much better when it's a competitive game like what it was last year. And if you can't remember how competitive it was, here's a video of Kyle Lowry taking a charge during the All-Star game.
Intercepted by Leonard. Leonard moving on Lowry. It is offensive foul, a charge.
He finally got it. Kyle Lowry finally got the offensive foul, something you rarely see in an All-Star game.
Wow.
He guessed right. Kawhi Leonard went right.
And throughout this video I've just been playing the final minutes of the All-Star game just so you can see the intensity that these players were playing at. And if you want another reminder of how competitive this All-Star game was, here's a video of LeBron complaining to the referees in the All-Star game. So yeah, this is obviously just a bit of a side note now, but I do hope this year's All-Star game is just as competitive as last year's, but the fans won't be there. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, first of all, thank you so much for watching. And if you could like the video as well, that really does help me out. And I say this every now and again, but if you do have any video suggestions for me, just feel free to leave them down below. And then as always, I'll see you on my next video.